So you're majorly confused and you don't know what to do, and you need a little aid to get those decisions made. You know where to go, it's the one and only show, Major Confusions. Ding.
Hi everyone, I'm Dina, and welcome to the Intertwined podcast by Major Confusions, where we demystify how impact-driven and sustainable careers are built in the real world. She's a health advocate, a patient engagement consultant, a lecturer at King's College London, and a writer. She runs her own consulting firm, providing pharma companies, patient associations, charities, and clinicians with her expertise on how to better incorporate the patient voice and how they design and deliver healthcare. Trishna's path is anything but predictable. You'll hear how Trishna's own patient journey informed her career decisions, and now she works relentlessly to transform healthcare to become more patient-centric. Listen to this episode to hear the story of how Trishna started off as a shy A student to becoming a leader in a translational organization whilst volunteering as a patient advocate, and to now building her own company, speaking in front of millions, spreading a message that needs to be heard. This is most relevant to you if you've considered a career in communication, advocacy, or consulting. I love this super honest conversation with Trishna, and I hope you do too. Let's get started. Hi, Trishna. Thank you for being with me here. Yeah, I really appreciate it. With everybody, we start with the same question. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I want to be a professional hockey player, which is a bit ironic considering that hockey is actually an amateur sport. And so that was never going to actually be something which I could do as a job. But yeah, my ambition was that I was going to go to the Olympics. I was going to win a gold medal in field hockey, not ice hockey. And that was what I wanted to be when I grew up. So this was when I was a child. But then as I sort of moved through school and I was thinking about university and all of that, I wanted to go into journalism. I wanted to go into the media. I really loved writing and essentially putting news out there, like telling people stories and sharing their experiences. And I did lots of things to potentially support me in that kind of ambition. So when I was at school and at university, I did lots of work experience and voluntary work at local newspapers, magazines. I did local radio, so community and hospital radio. And yeah, did lots of work experience. But then when I graduated, essentially the practicalities came in and reality came in. And I ended up going into something which I would never, ever in a million years have ever said, I'm going to grow up and become a translator. But that's what I ended up doing.
Wow. What made you gravitate towards writing?
Yeah, it was something that from a very early age, my mum I always remember her keeping a journal, a diary. And so from a very early age, I wanted to be like mum. And I started keeping a diary from the age of around, 7 or 8 years old. I mean, at that age, it was mostly what I had for breakfast that morning and who I was friends with. And by the end of the day, was I still friends with them? But yeah, so I started keeping a diary very, very early. And so I was very shy as a child. I'm an identical twin, and myself and my twin, we were each other's best friends. And because we were so close, and also both of us were very, very shy, we found it hard actually talking to other people. We found it hard to make friends. We didn't have many friends or close friends. We weren't the sort of the popular ones in school. And for me, writing was a way to express myself. And it was a way that I could do that without having to talk to people. And it was something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed creative writing. I used to write stories and poems, and it was just, yeah, like I said, I felt like it was a way to express myself in a way that I felt comfortable with, which I think was why I gravitated towards writing. And then as my confidence as I grew up and my confidence did start to grow, it then moved into things like I said, I did hospital and community radio, which was also about connecting with people and communication. But it was also, again, radio was, it didn't really mean you had to speak to people face to face. You weren't necessarily going physically seeing all the people that were listening to you. So again, it was a way in which I could communicate that I was comfortable with, which I think is really funny, because now one of the things I love the most is public speaking. I love getting up on stage and being able to present and connect with the audience and see their expressions and their reactions and, you know, and have that connection. But that's really been born out of my passion for patient engagement and advocacy, which I know we will come on to, which has ended up being the way that my career has gone. And that's been a passion. And I really believe that if you're passionate about something, it will make you step out of your comfort zone. And so even though for a long time I didn't have the confidence to speak to people and to communicate in that way, when I felt actually this really needs to be said, and I think the most effective way of doing that is to get up on a stage or to go on television or to, go on the radio, it makes you do that. So yeah, I think back to, if I was to go back in time and tell a, 7-year-old Trishna, when you're, in the, where are we now? The 2020s, you will be highly comfortable. And in fact, you'll even enjoy it and want to do it, getting up on stage or going on television in front of literally thousands or television, millions of people. I think the 7-year-old Trishna probably wouldn't have believed it.
Yes. How do you think that evolution happened?
I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2008. So for people who don't know, multiple sclerosis is a chronic condition. It basically where the immune system, which is the body's natural defense system, becomes faulty, and it mistakenly attacks healthy tissue in the brain and the spinal cord. So it causes nerve damage and can result in a whole different range of symptoms, from mobility issues, bladder and bowel issues, extreme fatigue, sensory issues. It can affect your vision. It can affect speech and swallowing and cognitive function. And I was diagnosed with that when I was 28. And the diagnosis experience wasn't great. I felt very disempowered by the healthcare system and the healthcare professionals that I was seeing. And that prompted me into getting into essentially patient advocacy, because I felt like, okay, this is something that I feel needs to change. People shouldn't be feeling disempowered. And also, as an Asian woman, so I'm of Indian heritage, and there was lots of things which, being an Asian woman, affected my experience of living with MS. So there's a lot of prejudice and stigma attached to chronic illness and disability. There's a lot of ignorance around what MS is, a lot of misconceptions. There was difficulties in trying to explain about MS to members of my family who didn't speak English. And that really that shaped my experience of being diagnosed and living with MS. So that got me involved in volunteering for various patient groups to raise awareness about MS. What is it? What is it like to live with it? What can it mean for somebody who's been diagnosed with MS? And also, I wanted to try and empower other people who are living with MS, who are being diagnosed with MS, to be able to become more informed and also be able to share in the decision making. There was the decision making about their healthcare. So yeah, like I said, I started to volunteer for lots of patient organizations. And from there, I then started to be asked to work with industry, so pharmaceutical companies, digital health companies, medcoms, medical communications agencies, and it basically all just snowballed. And I went from volunteering specifically in MS for patient groups to now working with lots of different stakeholders within the healthcare ecosystem, and not only working within MS, but lots of different disease areas and also what we say above therapy area, because there are lots of issues that actually affect lots of different patient communities. So things like diversity, equity, and inclusion in healthcare, patient involvement in health information, good patient engagement practice. So how are organizations, whether it's the NHS, whether it's a pharmaceutical company, how are they partnering with patients in order to make their products or their information or their solutions more patient-centered? So being involved in that really was a passion. And I was doing all of this alongside my full-time job as a translator for a business intelligence company. And increasingly, I started to realize that it sounds really cheesy. This was what I was meant to do in life. And the first thing people often say to me when I tell them that I have MS, or I live with several chronic conditions, so any of the conditions that I have, but particularly with MS, people say, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that." And I say to them, don't be, because if it hadn't been for my MS diagnosis, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And, it would be a case of I am the person I am today because of my MS. So I am the person I am, and can go back to 7-year-old Trishna and say, you will have much more confidence. You won't be as shy as you are right now at 7 years old. You will be doing what you want to be doing in life. And it was because of my MS diagnosis. And I think I feel very lucky, because there are lots of people who go through life and don't have the opportunity to be in a career, for want of a better word, or be in, in a working role where it doesn't feel like work, because you're so passionate about it that, you don't mind working long hours or doing weekends, because it doesn't feel like work, because you're doing it because you love it so much. And, there are times now when I wake up and I feel slightly guilty. I'm like, should I be enjoying work this much? But yeah, it's something which has been very much in evolution, because it came out of my volunteering. My volunteering gave me the opportunity to build up the skills that I didn't have or wasn't able to develop in my full-time job, because it wasn't necessary. Also helped me gain the confidence that I needed to do things like stand up in front of all the employees of a pharmaceutical company and talk to them about whatever it is that I'm going to talk to them about. But I was able to do that in an environment where actually there was no pressure, because as a volunteer, everything that you do, it should be appreciated, because you're doing it, you're volunteering your time, you're doing it because you want to help. But that also gives you, like I said, it gives you some scope, some leeway to be able to try out new things without the pressure of, oh my goodness, am I going to get fired for this? So yeah, the volunteering, I think, really helped. And then alongside that, I still had obviously the security of my full-time job. And it got to a point eventually where I was able to, so it was a combination of sort of practicalities and also things that were happening within the company. I was able to go part-time. And then, yeah, I eventually left the company, and full-time I'm now doing patient engagement and advocacy. I have my own company. It's what I'm doing all the time now, and absolutely love it. And I feel like, so it's very much, people ask me, how did you get to where you are? Because there are other people who would like to be doing, for instance, and doing what I'm doing and be at the point where I'm at. And I want to be able to say to them, oh, I had a plan. And if you do this, this, and this is how you will get there. But for me, there was no plan. It all happened very organically. Don't get me wrong, there are certain probably the decisions that I made or people that I met which have really helped along the way. But so much of it has just been organic. There hasn't been an intention there. It's been actually one opportunity led to something else, and that led to something else. So yeah, when people ask, well, how do I do what you're doing? I say to them, well, I can share my experience, and I can, talk about some of the things which I think have helped along the way. So for instance, things like networking, being active on social media, doing some training or increasing your knowledge around, for instance, with me, it was increasing my knowledge around the pharmaceutical industry and how medicines are developed. But I can't say that that's necessarily going to work for everyone, because for me, it was just, that's the way it happened. And there was a huge amount of luck. I was, being in the right place at the right time. So my first opportunity to work with industry came because my neurologist had asked me to speak at a workshop that he was running for people from the pharmaceutical industry. And he said, would you come and speak as an expert patient in MS? And there was somebody there who happened to really enjoy the session that I talked in. And he said, I really enjoyed your session. Would you come and speak at our offices? And that was the first opportunity I had to work with industry. So if I'd been busy that day and I'd said to my neurologist, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it, who knows? So yeah, and I've also been very lucky in that there have been certain people who I consider as mentors and who have really supported me along the way. I mean, and this is besides, and it goes without saying, my family, my immediate family, particularly my mum and dad, have provided so much support, particularly physically, to be able to manage, especially in the sort of the early days, a full-time job and all the volunteering and the advocacy and trying to manage all my conditions, etc. But then there's also been people who I would say professionally who have supported me, encouraged me, which I think is really important because that has given me confidence and helped sometimes, guide me. So I think that it doesn't matter what career you're in, if you're able to find people who can do that, who can provide guidance and support, and who you can perceive as a mentor, I think can really help.
Did you go out and find them, or do you feel like there was something about Trishna that they wanted to kind of support you?
Yeah, it was, again, I didn't go out and find anybody. Again, there was no plan, but I'm saying it's really important and can be really helpful to have mentors. I'm saying that with hindsight because I never set out to go and find a mentor. I didn't know how helpful it was going to be. It just so happened. So one of the people that I actually consider a mentor is that person from the pharma company who saw me speak for the first time and asked me to come and speak at their offices, and we kept in touch, and he has supported me continuously throughout my journey, and we're still we're still good friends now. I still go to him for advice. There's somebody else who actually used to work for one of the patient advocacy organizations, charities that I do work with. And my neurologist, because so when I was diagnosed, the neurologist who diagnosed me wasn't patient-centered. Like I said, it was a very disempowering experience. After a few years, I changed to another neurologist who was very forward-thinking, very patient-centered. We have discussions about my healthcare on an equal basis. So he respects my views and my opinions and is very much, you know, we share in the decision making. And yeah, I consider him a mentor as well, because, you know, he's encouraged me to become an informed patient, to become an expert patient, to get involved in all these things, which I then started to get involved with. So I didn't set out to find people, but it's just, I've been very lucky that people have come into my life who I have then developed relationships with, and then look back and think, oh, actually, yes, that turned out to be a relationship where I do consider them a mentor. So yeah, it sounds like I haven't planned much, which is really ironic because I am actually a planner. I plan and organize like everything. I'm the kind of person, so I don't like surprises. I like to know what I'm doing and when. But yeah, with this, it's a lot of it's just happened. And it's been a lot. Don't get me wrong. I put in a lot of hard work. And I think maybe that's what people have seen. They've seen the passion that I have, but also the amount of work and effort that I put in. It's literally like 110% all the time. And maybe that's what they see.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what if we were to ask them what they saw in you to invest in your growth, what would it be?
Yeah, I think those are the two main things. It's my passion and the fact that I work really, really hard. I don't do things that I don't feel that I will be able to give my all to. You know, I feel that it's really important, particularly doing what I'm doing, that I'm able to bring value. I don't do things half-heartedly. I put in all the effort that I can. And I think that that's something that they recognize and that they appreciate. I think that then feeds back into what they're able to also, you know, it's always a two-way thing, isn't it? So they know that if they're going to invest time and effort in me, they know that it's going to be worth it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. They saw that if they give, they'll see that it's really helping with your growth and with the impact that you're bringing.
Particularly the people who've been with me for a long time. So, for instance, this person at the pharma company, the person that I know who used to work for one of the charities that I do work with. I mean, they've literally seen me grow over the last, more than decade. And, you know, they say to me, you know, that what they've seen and how I've developed and what I'm doing, they're really proud of it because I have grown and I have developed. I can see that. And I think it's nice for them to also, and I make a point of telling them that they had a hand in it, because their support, their guidance, their help, their encouragement, you know, has help me. And I think that's really important, to be able to say to the people who you feel have supported you and have helped you along the way, to tell them, because then they feel appreciated and they can see. And, you know, it's one of those things where sometimes I feel that just generally as society, we don't tell each other enough how much we appreciate people. So I do always make a point of just saying thank you, and you've helped me, you have me, and I get that and I appreciate it, and you're valued in my life.
That's super important. Showing appreciation. People want to help, and it will make them feel good that you do value their help. I guess looking back at Trishna in high school, Trishna in university, and then being a translator, and Trishna now, how do you feel that your career philosophy has evolved? Because it seems like everything's been like organic.
So when I was at school, I was highly motivated. I excelled academically. I was a straight A student, always getting the top grades and everything. And again, worked really, really hard. At university, I still worked hard, but I started to learn that there was more to life than just studying. Because at school, I basically studied and played hockey. That was it. I didn't have a social life and didn't really do much apart from those two things. And with hockey, again, I was very driven. So I was playing hockey at a high level. I was playing it. Gosh, there was at one point when I was around 17, 18, and I was literally playing 7 days a week. So, very, very driven and motivated. And then, like I said, so I went to university, still very highly driven, but started to I'd say loosen up slightly. And, it started to find out what it was like to have a social life. But at the same time, knew that I wanted to come out of university with a first class degree, which I did, and was very driven in, as I mentioned before, I wanted to go into the media. The year after graduating was really tough because I had got all of this work experience under my belt. I'd got a first class degree, obviously very driven. I wanted to be in the media and hadn't really experienced, for want of a better word, failure. I'd succeeded in what I'd done. And then I went through a year of literally rejection. All the jobs that I was applying for, either I was getting a straight no, not even an interview, or I was being told, well, if you consider coming to work for us for free for a year, then we'll consider your application. I was like, no, I've just got a first class degree. I've got all of this work experience. The reason why I did all this work experience was so I didn't have to work for free after I graduate. And it was really demoralizing. And I actually ended up in translation because they were the first company to offer me a job, and it took a year. And
wow.
I mean, ironically, translation was, so I did European studies and Spanish, as that was my degree. And in the Spanish, in the language part, translation was, it was a core module, and I had to do it every single year of the degree. And I hated it. It was the part I absolutely hated. And so, to then be offered, the first job that I was offered was as a translator. I thought, oh, how on earth has this happened? But it got to the point where after a year, I had a student debt. I needed to start working. I couldn't afford to be working for free. And so I said, okay, the company, the job role was based close to where my parents still lived. So I said, I can take that job, move back home. And the plan, so there was a plan. The plan was to stay for a couple of years and then move on to something else. But so a couple of years wasn't enough to really fully embed yourself into the job role. Plus, I had the opportunity, and again, I was very lucky in terms of the way that my career within that company happened, opportunities were very timely. So I joined the company, actually not in a translation, wasn't specifically in a translation role. I ended for, I think it was like 3 months or 4 months, I was doing abstracting purely in English, and I was being asked to do the odd translation. And then after 3 or 4 months, there was a role that opened up, which was fully in translation. Did that. But then there was an opportunity that came up to become a deputy team leader. I thought, well, that's good experience. I'd never been in any kind of like team management role or any. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And then 4 years at a company, I was diagnosed with my MS. And then I was like, well, I need to concentrate on my health now. I'm not. And the company was really, really understanding about my MS and had always been so supportive in, making adjustments for me so that I could continue working. They were very understanding about, time I had to take off for medical appointments. And so before I knew it, another year turned into another year and another year. And eventually I ended up staying at the company for 19 years.
Wow.
Yeah, which is something you don't really hear of these days. People stay, at companies for 2-3 years and then move on to the next thing. Whereas for me, like I said, it wasn't the plan, but because of circumstances and or opportunities, I ended up staying for 19 years doing translation.
What impact did it have on you navigating your health while also taking care of your career, managing a team?
So, as I said, the support that I had from the company was absolutely brilliant, and that played a key role in me being able to continue to work full time. Like I said, they were very understanding. I had flexible working hours to help manage my fatigue. I was allowed to work from home. And this was at a time, this was way before the pandemic. And this was at a time when, people generally didn't work from home. And I had a huge amount of support from the team that I was managing, and which really meant a lot to me. I had a very reliable, so after being deputy team leader, I then progressed after a couple of years to being a team leader. And when I was a team leader, again, so my deputy was very reliable and very understanding and very supportive. And so I think having that support and also the support from my line managers as well really made a difference, because doing what I'm doing now, I hear people's experiences of living with chronic conditions like MS, and they don't have supportive employers. And it's very difficult to manage working and their health. And, if they also have a family, and try to just manage all of those things. And so the fact that I did have support from the people around me at work made a huge difference. I think also what I was doing at work was completely different to what I was doing within the advocacy and patient engagement arena. So I felt like when I was doing the patient advocacy and engagement, it didn't feel like I was doing double work, if that makes sense. I was doing things which were completely different. It was stimulating me in different ways to the way that work was stimulating me. And I felt like I was constantly learning, and I love learning. I've always said that I would love to go back to university and do a master's or do another degree, just because I love learning and I love knowledge. And I think that the fact that it was two very, very different things, again, that also really, really helped. I do know some people who, for instance, they work in healthcare and then they also do, for instance, volunteering for health charities. And in certain ways, they feel like they're always working because the two are so similar. But I never felt like that. And the company was always very proud of everything that I did. So, you know, if I received a patient advocacy award, they would share it on the company, in the company newsletter and on the intranet, and, you know, share it with all the colleagues around the globe. So I was on Strictly Come Dancing, which is Dancing with the Stars in other countries, in 2015. And it was a special 4-part edition of the show, which was specifically for people who'd given lots to the community. They'd done lots of charity work, that kind of thing. And so there were 6 people who were picked, and there was over 11,000 nominations. So wow. I was literally one of 6 out of 11,000. And yeah, when I emailed my boss and his line manager, I said, by the way, I've been chosen to go on Strictly Come Dancing. It's going to be involved like the next about 3 or 4 months. I'm going to have to take some time off for filming, like that. They were just, that's brilliant, Trishna. Just tell us what you need. You know, we will be as flexible as we possibly can be. And, you know, we'll try and work around things, because they understood that this was such a fantastic opportunity to raise awareness about MS. And, you know, all the support and stuff that they had given me, this was an opportunity for, you know, other people to see what that support can mean for somebody who's living with a condition like MS, what it can lead to. And so, yeah, they were always very supportive, and that has made a huge difference in terms of then being able to, like I said, being able to do all the advocacy work that I do and be where I am now. I fully believe everything happens for a reason, and that there are things, you do certain things in life without necessarily knowing why at that time, but it becomes clear often in hindsight. For instance, being in the media and had a job in the media, would I then have enjoyed my advocacy work as much? Because I was doing very similar things. So I was writing a newsletter, for instance. I was going on the radio to raise awareness about MS. Would I have had the flexibility in the media to have been able to manage my work around my health? Would I have been able to do all my advocacy alongside working in the media, where they're very often, particularly right at the beginning, it's often very long hours. You have to do a lot of traveling, and things like that. And so, yes, okay, I ended up doing translation, which at the time I thought, oh my goodness, that was the one part of my degree I really didn't enjoy. But now I'm thankful for it. I know that happened for a reason.
Yes. And it sounds like you also grew to enjoy the translation piece.
Yeah.
The fact that you stayed there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also for me, it was about being able to use my languages. And so languages they're living, and you need to be able to use them. Otherwise you forget very quickly. And I love languages. I feel that it's a way of being able to communicate. And so for me, being able to use, so it was Spanish, but also I did Dutch as part of my degree as well. And at times I would do Dutch translations. I was also able to do Portuguese translations as well, because of my Spanish. I had enough understanding to be able to translate from Portuguese, and to be able to use my languages every single day. I felt like, actually, this is great. And okay, yes, it was through translation, but I was still using my language. So, you know, that was good. And it meant that like I said, for 19 years, I was still continuing to learn, because again, languages, you learn continuously. So yeah, no, I'm really, really grateful for having been able to use my languages like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a career lesson learned is, okay, you might not get your first job that you wanted, but there's always a bright side. There's always a way you can look at it where you can actually learn, and then you'll see you can navigate once you're in that role.
Yeah, I think some of that also comes again from hindsight. Because if we were having this conversation the year after I'd graduated, I wouldn't be so optimistic.
No, exactly. And you talk to a lot of graduates now, unfortunately, like they graduate with high expectations, especially high achievers, doing really well in school, getting really good grades, and then exposed to the real world. Like, oh, okay, where do I fit in? I expected to fit in somewhere, but now I need to do something else. And I love your story. Like, it does work out, and yeah, it works out for the best usually.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd hope so. And I think there's something to be said also being aware of not burning out, because so after my degree, I did feel burnt out. I felt as though I'd spent essentially 20 odd years always striving to achieve the best academically, and I was really tired, you know, and then to have that added pressure of the fact that I kept getting rejected from job applications it was really difficult, and nobody had prepared me for that. Because, you know, everyone said, yeah, you've got a first class degree and, you know, you're going to be able to just walk into a job and everybody's going to want to have you. And it didn't happen. And nobody prepared me for that. So I think it's really important for particularly new graduates to just be aware and sometimes realistic about expectations. Because in a way, in academia, when you're at school, when you're at university, you're in kind of a bubble, and the real world isn't like that. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to have that awareness if you can. And also, if it doesn't work out, then know where to go to for support, because I was unprepared for it.
I think a lot of us, I think one of the major reasons I'm doing this podcast, and actually I'm in this career coaching career now, is you're just unprepared for career decisions post studying. And in university, you're used to getting like good grades and validation, and there's like a score, and it's just easy. You can study, and then you get grades, you get good grades. But in the real world, there's so many different paths as well. And I think there's like happiness equals reality minus expectations, right? So you graduate with really high expectations, and then reality hits.
And I mean, it's something which, so I mean, I saw careers advisors, because you do that, but at no point did anyone ever say you may not be able to do what you want to do. Now, I think actually that's important for people to know. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think it shouldn't be framed in a discouraging way, but it should be framed in a practical way. That, okay, you know what? Maybe consider this, as particularly because, especially in the UK, you have to make decisions which could potentially affect the rest of your career path. You have to make those decisions pretty early, when actually a lot of people don't really know what they want to do. So, I mean, some people have said to me, why don't you go into medical writing? Because that would combine my love of writing with, you know, obviously all the patient side of things. Well, to go into medical writing, you need a degree in essentially a science-related degree, medical-related degree. Well, I gave up science after GCSE, you know, so that, you know, a decision that I made at the age of 16 is still impacting potential career moves now.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, when you have go to these, career advisors, I think it is important for them to lay things out realistically and say, well, you may not end up doing what you want to be doing, but that's okay. Just be prepared and, and have different options available as well. I know that sometimes people say, oh, if you want to go for something, you should be absolutely solely focused on that and think, yes, that has its advantages, but not necessarily things aren't working out. And then you have other options.
Yeah. And then if things aren't working out, and now I think hearing your story, it's like, if you zoom out a bit, you weren't too excited in the beginning, but then over time you managed to find exactly what you said. I meant to do this. So maybe in the moment you might not see it, but over time you might actually get to where you are meant to be. But it sounds like you also were following your curiosity. You love to learn. You were working really hard. So it's like a combination of these things that led to you doing what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah, no. And I think I've also been lucky in that. So my parents have always instilled in me very good work ethic. And I've also very much appreciated, it's probably one of the reasons why I love learning so much, very much appreciated the value of education. So with both my parents, they were the first in their families to go to university. My dad particularly, so my dad often jokes that he went into sciences, so he actually did electrical engineering at university. He often jokes that he had to do something with numbers because he moved to the UK at the age of 14 from India and didn't really speak very much English. He said I was never going to go into anything that needed to use words. He said numbers I could understand because numbers in England were the same as numbers in India.
I love this.
Yeah, he knew that university was something that he could do because he'd obviously gone through school, done his A-levels and everything. And knowing that he was the first one of the family to go, I think was also a huge driving motivator for him. And I really appreciate that because for myself and my sisters, it was always, I think also particularly as females, it was always a case, we were always encouraged and there was never any question that if we wanted to go to university, we would have the support to go to university. But knowing that with so many people in, the extended family and things, that wasn't an opportunity, made me appreciate it more. And the fact that, like I said, my parents were the first in their families and there was always a very heavy emphasis on the value of education. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love learning so much, because I understand that value and the importance that education and the opportunities that education can bring.
Yeah, it just makes you appreciate it. And how do you think that impacted your drive?
I think it was huge. I think it was huge because, as I said, from a very young age, I was always very driven academically. I remember at primary school particularly, I used to hate the holidays because I used to love going to school. I used to love learning. And, and during the holidays, my mum, so particularly the summer holidays, because that's longer, so 6 weeks. And my mum, she had a rule that during summer holidays, for at least 4 weeks of the summer holidays, during the mornings, we still have to do like classes. So whether that was, and she still made it fun. So for instance, if she had taken us so we live close to London, if she took us to the Science Museum, for instance, then the next day we would have to write a report about it, about what we learned and things like that. Or, I remember one summer holidays and we visited Nottingham. I went to see Nottingham Castle and Robin Hood and all of that. And then we had to make basically like a scrapbook book, but it was essentially, if somebody else was going to visit Nottingham, make them a sort of a booklet to tell them all about what there is in Nottingham, kind of thing. And so it was made fun, but it was still learning. And again, I think that's pretty important, because for me, learning was always fun. Okay, maybe not the translation bit at university, but learning has always been fun. And maybe that also stems from the very first primary school that I went to was a very, very progressive primary school. And so they didn't tier classes according to age. So from the age of 4, or whenever it was that you started, to the age of, so it was little school, not middle school. So from the age of 4 to the age of about 7 or 8, you were all in the same class. And then you were streamed according for only certain subjects. So I think it was only maths and English. Everything else, you were with other kids who, you might be 5 years old, but you would be doing something with a 7-year-old, for instance.
Wow.
And they also encouraged you. So the way that it was set out, you had your classes basically around a central area. So in that central area, you had art, science, design. So like we have building blocks and things like that. Now, I was doing things at the age of 5 or 6, which I didn't even realize I was doing. So for instance, I remember having these really large, they were called the big blocks, and they were pretty big. You could climb inside them and things like that. And we would build houses with these big blocks. But then we were also given light bulbs with batteries and connectors. And we were making circuits at the age of 5, 6 years old. I didn't know that was making a circuit. And that, the fact that the way the light bulb worked, because I'd connected the positive and the negative. But it was very much, like I said, it was a very progressive school. And learning, I was learning so much knowledge without actually realizing I was learning, because it was all so much fun. And yeah, maybe that's another reason that I love learning so much, because from a very young age, it was always made into something fun.
Yeah, I really think that making things fun in education and at work really makes people commit to things longer, enjoy them, grow in them, want to get better in them. It's kind of what you said, like, I don't feel like I'm working, like you're enjoying the patient advocacy work right now. Obviously, there are hard times.
So I think it's more a sense of, so particularly doing what I'm doing, it's a sense of you're making a difference and you're helping people. And you're right. There are times when it is really hard, because you're working in a space where you're always talking about health, and it's often ill health. And a lot of the people that I work with have conditions, and some of them are very serious conditions. And there are plenty of there are patient advocates that I've known over the years who've passed away, who have, their condition has progressed. So it might be that, when I first met them, they were walking, for instance, and now they have to use a wheelchair permanently and things like that. That can be really tough. But again, it's been a learning experience, because I've had to learn how to manage that and have tools to be able to sometimes distance myself in order to save my own mental health, but do it in a way that also doesn't affect how I'm able to deliver support, or, be able to carry on being so immersed in the different patient communities. But at the end of the day, I'm also managing several chronic conditions. So if I don't look after my health, whether it's physical or mental health, I'm not going to be much use to anyone. So it's been a learning curve in that way. But ultimately, I feel like what I do is potentially making a difference to people's lives. And that is something which you just can't put a price on. Yeah.
And I see your smile even saying that. That's where the joy comes in. Like, what tools have worked for you? Because I really agree with you. You need to protect yourself in order to be able to help others. So what tools have worked out for you to protect your own like mental health? And especially when you said distancing, because a lot of people in helping careers find it hard to distance and still be able to show up fully and do the work.
So one of the key ways has been knowing how to set boundaries. So if somebody comes to me and says, oh, I really need this support, and I know that it's going to be too emotionally or mentally draining for me, then I will direct them to another place of support, whether that's one of the charity helplines, whether it's a support group. And I've learned not to feel guilty about doing that. Another way has been that again, it's about setting boundaries, but this is setting boundaries for myself that, this may sound really weird, but I don't now, in my pleasure time, spare time, I don't watch things like hospital dramas or health documentaries or anything to do with essentially health, because I'm doing that all the time while I'm working now. And I realize that I need to be able to switch off from that. And during my pleasure time, I watch other things or I read other things. So if I want to call somebody up and just have a chat on the phone, I will talk to people who know and understand that, yes, we might talk about some of my health issues or some of the things that I'm doing, but we've got other things to talk about. So I think that that's all really helped. And then I've also started to make sure that I do have time for myself. So whether it's just going out for a walk, or it is I'm trying to do meditation, even if it's only for 5 or 10 minutes, try to do a meditation where I can just completely zone out. And I think it all comes down to setting boundaries. I think that's what it is. And I know other people who are in this space, and particularly I know a number of people who work in the mental health space, where they've said similar things, that you have to also learn not to absorb other people's, for want of a better word, other people's pain, because if you're constantly doing that, it becomes detrimental to yourself. So, you can listen and provide support and guidance, but try not to absorb it, so that you're not taking on a weight that is then going to stop you from moving forward or being able to help other people, if that makes sense. I don't know if that.
No, 100%. Yeah, no. It's like you get so absorbed that it starts affecting you, and at some point you need to protect yourself, and in order to be able to do the work that brings wider impact as well.
Yeah.
I guess we're kind of coming full circle. I love your story. It feels like you had the passion to be an advocate, to be in the media, to be really telling a story when you were younger, and now you're really doing it for a really important cause. If you were to kind of change it to, instead of what did you want to be when you grew up, to what's your why today, what would your answer be?
it sounds like a really big why, but I want to be able to make a difference. And that's because I don't want people to go through the same thing that I went through when I was diagnosed. So to be able to make a difference, and to help empower other people so that they are able to make the decisions in the way that they want to make them about their healthcare. At the end of the day, the most valuable thing that we have in life, our health. You know, we've spoken a lot about lots of other things, you know, education, or, you know, or other things. The most important thing that we have in our life is our health. And so if I can help support people into being able to, like I said, make decisions in the way that they want to make them of their health, that for me is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I love it. And for people who are passionate or were intrigued about the idea of patient advocacy and patient engagement, what resources or, I don't know, tips or tricks for them to like go and learn about it?
So I would say the patient organizations, patient groups, so charities are a really great place to start. I would say just start by volunteering. So volunteering is more than only things like fundraising, because often people think, oh, when you volunteer for a charity, it's about going out and shaking a tin or going and running a marathon. There is so much more to volunteering than that. For some people, shaking a tin, running a marathon may be that's thing for them. But if it's not, there is so many different volunteering opportunities available. So if you do something and you're not really enjoying it, or you feel that actually this isn't right for you, don't feel guilty about saying, actually, can I try something else? Because the thing about volunteering is you have the opportunity to try out different things. And, you know, I always say to people, you have to enjoy your volunteering. That's your time. You're giving up your time. If you're not enjoying it, there is really no point. And also, if you're enjoying it, you're likely to give your all and your 100%. So yeah, I would say start by volunteering with some of the charities. And then there's also there are educational resources out there. So there are some, depending on the type of advocacy you want to go into, there are courses out there. Some of them are free and they're online. So the Social Health Network, which is part of Health Union, they have some really great advocacy training courses. EUPATI, which is EUPATI, does training for patient advocates who specifically want to learn more about the research and development of medicines. There's opportunities out there, and many of these resources and trainings, many of them are online and many of them are free to access as well. So I would say it's a combination. First of all, you know, go and find some charities, start volunteering. And then if you want to do some more structured training in patient engagement and advocacy, then there are training courses out there.
I love that. And I mean, having worked in building software products in healthcare, I think working with patients and building patient-centered products, it's so important. It's the number one thing. So your work is, I mean, as a product manager, that was like, get me the patients, please. I want to work. You want to build solutions that are patient-centric, whether they're medicine or software as a medical device or a medical device. It's so crucial. So
absolutely.
I mean, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Yeah. But
well, I was going to say, so people listening to this might think, goodness me, what do you mean that, you know, there's this whole thing around asking patients? Well, people who maybe don't know the healthcare industry very well may not realize that asking patients is a relatively new concept, and that for years, the medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, clinicians, the healthcare systems, like for the NHS. Patients were never factored in. It isn't like other industries where, for instance, you design a car, and the first people you go and ask drivers, people who actually drive cars. It's not been like that in healthcare. People never asked the patients what they wanted or what was important to them. So that, I think that's really important, I think, for people listening who maybe have no knowledge or very little knowledge of the healthcare industry, to understand that actually asking patients, the very people who are going to be using the drugs or the medical devices or reading the health information, that asking them and getting them involved in the development of those is relatively new.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think working in healthcare, you think it's obvious, like you're used to the difficulties of actually like talking to patients, especially with the regulations in like a biotech company and a pharma company, because they don't want you to be selling before a drug is out. And thank you for saying that. It is an impossible task, but I think the industry's changing, and because of people doing the work that you're doing, what you're doing, it's changing to actually include the patient voice, which is so important. The last question is, what do you believe is one of the most underrated skills for building a sustainable and meaningful career?
Maybe, and this is probably coming with a little bit of bias because of the way that my career has developed. It's that ability to be flexible and to be able to effectively deal with not necessarily planning for every single thing. Because, all throughout school, university, when you graduate, you're always told to always plan. You need to have a goal. You need to know where you're going to be in the next 1, 3, 5 years. You need to set a target, then you work towards that target. And actually, I wish that I had much earlier on learned how to let go a little bit, because it maybe wouldn't have changed the way in which things happened, but it would have helped me, I think, mentally and emotionally, to be able to better deal with when things didn't work out to that plan.
Letting go of control and accepting things as well as they come, and it allows you to be able to deal with them as well, like when they do come.
And I mean, I get these things that pop up. It must be to do with the algorithms in my social media about things like, if you want to be successful, then these are the 5 things you must do. And well, if you do those 5 things and you still don't get to where you need to be, then what?
Then what? Yeah.
And so I think that's really where that ability to be flexible with yourself, and deal with things when they don't go to plan, becomes really important.
I love this. It's so important. I think I personally am working on it. It's adaptability and flexibility and just letting go. Especially when you're building your own thing, you probably have to think about it as well. Thank you so much, Trishna. It was really incredible, and I really appreciate your time today.
It's a
really
pleasure
fun talking to you. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and think that a friend or family member might benefit from Trishna's experience, please share it with them. Our goal is to demystify how career decisions are made in the real world. and to empower others to pursue building a path towards a sustainable and meaningful career. We know that careers are really not a straight line, as you could tell by Trisha's experience. So this is totally normal and keep on going. Follow us at Major Confusions on LinkedIn for more of these episodes. This is the third episode of the series, and if you have any observations or feedback, please send them my way. Keep in mind the 3 C's: compassion, curiosity, and courage. See you next time.